It's such a joy to be here with you all. I don't always read every single word in the emails that I get, so I missed the line that said there would be people in the sanctuary. So when I walked in this morning and the choir was here and people were bustling all around, I realized I'd missed something yet again. But this was a wonderful, wonderful surprise. It is so great to be here. It is so wonderful to be home. And those of you who have homes to return to where they welcome you and where you have happy memories and where things went well and it grew you into the wonderful person that you are, that's what it's like for me to be here at Brentwood. You all loved me so well and so long and in just the absolute right way. And I try to represent you well. Sometimes people say, "Where'd you get that?" Or, "I didn't know you could do that in church." Or, "Is that what they taught you in seminary?" And I said, "Oh, no, I learned it at BPC." So let's talk about talking to one another this morning. We're reading from Genesis and then we're reading from Acts, two scriptures that talk about how people talk to one another and what happens. So the first one may be a familiar story to some of you. It's the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, the whole world had one language and a common speech. Everybody spoke the same language. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, "If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other." So the Lord scattered them from over all the earth and they stopped building the city. So this is one of the stories that answers the question, why? Why do we have so many languages? This is a story in our Christian tradition, in our Judeo-Christian tradition, that answers this. The people got too close to one another. The people got too far away from why they were here, which was to serve God and to honor God. So, 3,000 years later, 4,000 years later, we read in Acts. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues. All of them, all of the disciples, the apostles, the followers of Jesus. They spoke in tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now they were staying in Jerusalem, God-fearing Jews from every nation under the heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment because each heard their own language being spoken. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Aren't all of these who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our own native tongue? We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" These, my friends, the word of God for the people of God. Sometimes we just don't know what to say. We see something, we know it is wrong, and we say nothing. The next morning, we think of several things that we might have said, but the moment is gone. The perpetrators think we agree with them, the targets feel alone and abandoned, and we feel like failures as witnesses, as allies, as advocates. And then there are the times when sorry isn't enough. We just don't know what to say. Now, if this sounds like you are among a large number of good-hearted people who want to do the right thing, but sometimes just don't know what the right thing to say. We can blame it on the first people in Genesis who tried to build a tower so great that they would be known throughout the world. We have so many languages and so many cultural codes, even when we know what we want to say or what we should say, we don't have the right words at the right time. Well, I've been thinking about this a lot and have come to the conclusion that there are basically three things that you can say. You can say, oops. You can say, yikes. And you can say, sorry. Now, of course, there's more to it than that, but hold on to those three words and all that they might connote, and let's go a little deeper. Why do you need to know what to say? We are imperfect human beings. Teilhard de Chardin said that we are spiritual beings on a human journey. Well, that's a very high standard and reminds us of all we need to keep learning. We are figuring out things on a daily basis, and things keep changing. Power differentials in relationships, or do you speak up, do you speak down, are you on the same level? The identities, your identities and the identities of people around you. Relationship rules are changing. Taboo topics, things that we were taught you don't talk about in public, are being talked about everywhere. The language we use to describe all these things are changing. People are trying to write glossaries and style sheets in the organizations that I work with so they'll know what to say, and I keep reminding them that language is dynamic and changing, and just because they write it down, not to get too attached to it because it'll be changed next year. See, as our world shrinks, our relationship circles expand, and there are more and different rules for engagement and different cultural codes. So what's a cultural code? House rules. Think about the difference in worship here at BPC and worship anywhere else. Think about the rules for eating at your mother's house compared to the rules for eating in your home, or the rules for sleeping or watching TV, or the standards for cleaning, the rules for addressing the various people in your life, your great aunt, your nephew, your grandchild, your sibling. The many rules for describing the differences between us, those rules are cultural codes. So how do you learn them? Someone teaches them to you if you're lucky, like a parent or a teacher. You make mistakes, and then you get that really uncomfortable silence, and you just know, oh, I did something wrong. Something wasn't right. And then maybe they'll tell you what it was. And we learn from watching and listening to other people. Now, we have some guidelines, like the 10 Commandments, and the Golden Rule, which is often misinterpreted. People think if I treat you exactly the way I want you to treat me, if I model for you how to treat me, then you'll be happy. But that assumes that everyone's like you and everybody wants to be like you and everybody wants exactly the same thing that you want. And if you think about it, that's not true. So the Golden Rule is treat people the way they want to be done too. You see, it's all about relationships. Whatever we do, wherever we are, we want to let people know I see you and I care. I see you and I care. That's my job as a minister. That's your job as a manager. That's your job as a parent. That's your job as a partner. I see you. I see you there. I'm trying hard to listen because I care. The quality of the relationships are directly related to the nature of the communication. Now, the social climate in our country is polemic, us and them. For us or against us, the oppressed and the oppressors. There's name calling. We call people perpetrators and enemies. There's shaming and blaming and canceling, cancel culture, calling people out. What would happen if you call someone in? Call them in for a conversation. Call them in to explore what happened. Call them into the circle to learn something about themselves and each other and you and what happened. The most frequent comment that I get from my clients is, well, we just didn't know what to say. This is like 3 months ago something happened and they just figured out they should call a consultant to help. Or they'll say, well, we can't say that anymore. Well, what do we say? Most of us can identify things that are blatantly wrong. Basic rudeness, sexism, racism, identity hatred. But some things that used to be okay are just not okay anymore. And some things that are okay in one setting are not okay in another. In-group language, for example, the things that you can say to your sibling, the things that you can say to the people in your family are not the things that you can say to them outside of the house and not the things that you will tolerate other people saying to them. The names you use, the language you use. You don't want outsiders using that same informal, intimate language. See, some words that were in-group language are now known by communities outside of that group. And so people say, well, if they use it, why can't we? That's the difference between equality and equity. Everyone doesn't get the same thing. Languages and relationships are calibrated and nuanced. So before you open your mouth, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the goal here? Is it nurturing the relationship? Is it building community? Is it reciprocation of a hurt? You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you back. Is it repair of some harm? Is it creating space for grace? Space for grace. After you decide what your goal is, then you have to determine your role as a witness, as an ally, as a target, as an agent. Are you going to be, is the agent aggressive? What happened? Was it well-intentioned and undisciplined, or were they really trying to hurt someone? And what's the context that you're working in? If you hear something that is absolutely outrageous from the pulpit, do you stand up and yell and walk out? Or do you wait and say something? Do you write a letter? Do you start whispering in the across the pews? What do you do? It depends on the context. So what do you say now that you've taken your foot out of your mouth? What do you say after you've witnessed an unacceptable act? What do you say to lead an uncomfortable conversation? What do you say to be appropriate for the situation while honoring your truth? What do you say when the choice is between resilience and endurance? What do you say when your goal is self-care and self-compassion? What do you say when the context invites you to leave some space for grace? How might you protect yourself so that you can come across as strong and calm and grounded? In seminary, we learn to try to be an unanxious presence. It's kind of hard, it's aspirational. What do you say when you feel you need to defend yourself? When you're responsible for managing the environment, you're in charge and there's stuff going on in the room and you're not quite sure what to do, what do you say when you're trying to just survive the Thanksgiving dinner with your family? You can say, oops, I blew it. You can say, yikes, that was really wrong. And you can say, sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. Or sorry, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry they said that to you. See, so your responses are determined by lots of things, but the bottom line is that you can say something. And it doesn't have to be in words. It could be with your face. It could be with your gestures. It could be with your silence. But make sure that your silence is truly meaningful and not just leaving space for someone to continue to be harmful. See, you've got to say something. Don't let your silence perpetuate the harm. Don't let your embarrassment keep you from doing the right thing. You want to stand strong. You want to speak up. You want to create a space where you can learn something, and you want to say something. Let the Spirit of God speak through you. Just as those first followers of Christ surprised the people around them by speaking in a way that everyone understood. Oops, yikes, sorry, can be communicated in many different ways. You have to find a way that works for you. And you have to find the way and find the words that will work for your audience. Do that, and have a happy Thanksgiving.